This is right. Good morning, good morning, good morning. All right. So happy Saturday. Today we're going to talk about contracts because I truly believe that is our number one value proposition. I believe some of you have open houses scheduled today. Is that true? Scott, Mike?
True story.
Okay, so you do. Mike, you don't have one today?
No, I have one tomorrow morning.
Okay. All right. So that starts at 11, right?
Yes.
Mine doesn't start till 1 to 3.
Yes. Okay. Because I was trying to sense how quick I had to fly through this contract to make sure that you guys got through it if you had open houses scheduled to start at 11 o'clock this morning, which is the same time we end here. So that works. But I always like to start my coaching classes with one thing. Tell me something good. So what's been good and new and exciting out there in everybody's world?
I have a client.
Woohoo! Tell us about it, Gary Bell.
Oh, they're my neighbor.
That's okay. There's nothing wrong with neighbors. We like neighbors.
It's been probably 18 months in coming,
Okay.
building and connecting, and their lease is up in September. They have 3 little girls under 3.
Wow. So, have we gotten them all pre-approved? So tell me a little bit more.
Yeah, we will have their final letter next week
Nice.
because they've had to go through some hoops to get that done too.
Right. That's not uncommon.
No,
Not uncommon at all.
and I have
Awesome.
8.5 days left to teach this year.
That's the good news. So it's full-time real estate this summer, right?
Yep.
Love it, love it, love it. I love working with our teacher clients. Time to get it ramped up. All right. Who else has got something good happening?
I possibly have a listing, but if I get it, it won't be till like January 1 probably ish.
Okay. So why the January timeframe?
She actually bought a piece of land in Mexico and is moving back to be close to her family and having a house built.
Okay, so she won't be
So-
able to make that move until she gets closer to where she needs to be. Makes
Yep.
sense?
Yep.
All right. Now I just have to figure out how to download something. See if I can get this to work. Technology is not always my best friend, for those of you who don't know me very well, but I'm going to attempt to upload a document. Okay. So hopefully in the chat, you guys will all be able to grab and download a file. And what I always recommend is printing it and taking notes. I believe that the best way to learn how to do contracts is go to every contracts class you can. Did anybody go to Kevin's contract class on Thursday? No? Okay. To go as many contract classes taught by as many different people in our market center. So most of the contracts classes in our market center are taught by myself. Bob teaches a few once in a while, and Kevin does his how to stay out of jail with the contract to buy and sell, which is 4 CE credits, which are always good. But go to those classes, ask questions. Sue Bensel also teaches once about every 4 to 5 months. She does an online CE class. It's all day. But she goes through the buyer docs, the seller docs, and the contract to buy and sell and all the variety of addendums. And there are CE credits with it. What I love is you've got people who are willing to teach you how to do this. But if you just sit and listen to us talk, it's not going to do much. So I always tell people about Margaret's purple folder. And I'm going to pull it out here of my desk because I'm actually in the office. And this purple folder of mine has the notes from every contract class I have taken since I started real estate in December of 2014. Now, I don't take many anymore because I teach so many, but what I found was very helpful was by having a copy of the contract that was being taught and making my notes directly on the contract. When I got that first client, it allowed me to pull my notes and to be able to look at my notes so I could at least make my first attempt myself without reaching out to my coach for help on the contract. Make sense? Okay, then, so let's say today we're doing the exclusive right to buy. So you take class from me and you write down some notes. Later this year, Bob's teaching an exclusive right to buy. Grab that same contract because the form hasn't changed. Still the same form, 2023. Add any new notes that Bob gives you on the same form so that way you've got all the notes related to that form in one place. So that's my pro tip on how to get the best out of these. So I hope I stalled long enough for all of you to be able to grab and print. Or worst case scenario, okay, whatever. I don't know why CTM is telling me about an outage now. That happened on Monday.
Yeah, I'm having trouble with my CTM too. It's telling me about an outage.
Yeah, just say you acknowledge it and it'll let you in. Earlier today, it was letting me in without any problems. So, which was a good thing because I had to recreate my classwork. All right, so here we go. So I'm gonna share my screen. Are you working on a contract, Scott?
No, I just I've used it before. Just to kind of get used to using CTM. So I've taken their class and kind of got
Perfect.
used to adding a client and that kind of stuff. I
Awesome.
actually have been through an exclusive right to buy contract. So I actually have one in front of me that I have notes on already.
Okay,
Um,
fantastic.
so I'm not going to print yours. I'm just going to continue to take notes, and my folder is actually red. It's not purple.
Oh, look at you. Just make sure that the form you're using now says mandatory 123.
Oh, I'm actually mandatory 1-20.
Yep, so they updated the form at the beginning of the year. So that's the first part of my contracts class, right? Is to always make sure you're using the correct version. Okay. When you're using a system like CTM, they do a really good job of getting the right ones out there. But on the same token, we always want to make sure we have the right ones. And the commission did update the exclusive right to buy and exclusive right to sell for January 2023. So I honestly don't know that it changed that much, Scott, that you really need to print it, but just out to the side, maybe make notes about that particular pieces. Okay.
You got it. Yep.
All right. So everybody ready? Nope, Carrie's not back. And I'm trying something new with my classes because I hate teaching to Zoom only. And I get my energy from people being in the room. So the best way that I can make myself feel like I'm in the room is if I see your faces and your microphones are off. So unless you've got screaming children or barking dogs in the background, just leave your mics off. It's easier to talk. It's easier to engage. It's easier to be a part of it.
I have some chaos going on around here for about 30 minutes. And then
All right, well, we'll put up with, yeah, well, that's fine. We will make it work. All right, so in your packet, the first form you have, there's 3 primary forms that we use when we're working with a buyer. The very first one is the exclusive right to buy. When you're using CTM, which is the software that we use, it's the electronic signature software that 90+% of the brokers in the Denver metro area use, you always want to start with your exclusive right to create your folder. So this will always be the first document you make. And obviously it's probably the most important one. So again, as I stated, we want to check to make sure we have the right form. I'm going to actually bounce to CTM, and I'm actually going to teach this off of my CTM, because then you can see what I've built in my template. When you have the opportunity to take CTM classes, I highly encourage the beginner and the intermediate. One, I can teach you how to do certain things, but I'm not the expert on their software. And I know they have made tons of updates since the last time I took a class. I'm probably not even using this as well as I could be. Okay. When you sign up the first time, it's going to ask you who your brokerage is. Please make sure that you use our proper name. Our proper name is Keller Williams Avenues Realty, LLC. We are not K-Wave. We're not KW. We're not Keller Williams Abs, right? And trust me, I've seen it all. but our legal name is Keller Williams Avenues Realty, LLC. So you want to make sure that that's who you align yourself with in your brokerage so that your contracts are with the right brokerage. When you do that, it will automatically populate our logo. Also, when you enter, you want to make sure that the name on the contract that you enter, your name as the broker matches your name as it is on your license. Okay, so two very important things. Carrie always confuses me when I get contracts from her for that reason. All right, we talked a little bit about this, but always make sure you have the correct dates. Okay, mandatory January 23. That's why I was scrambling this morning to get new copies because I haven't worked with a buyer all year. Okay, this is a binding contract. It does talk about compensation is not set by law. Charges are established by each real estate brokerage firm. Okay. The exclusive right to buy listing contract. How are you working with this client? Are you a buyer's agent or are you a transaction broker? 99% of the time it's going to be a buyer agency. Okay. Over here in the date, this is going to be the date that you're completing the document with the buyer. Now, as I walk through this, you guys, I'm not going to just tell you how, but I'm going to try and explain as many of these different paragraphs as I can that are relevant. And what you're going to hear me doing is using the verbiage and the dialogues that I use when I go over these forms with my clients. So I'm also not even teaching you just the how of to create, but the how to present it. Okay. All right. First one. This is an agreement between the buyer and the brokerage firm. We are the broker who is working on behalf of the brokerage firm. In section number 2, as long as you're in our office, you will be in a multiple person firm. So you want to check the box in 2.1. The only time you're going to use 2.2 is if you go independent and you do not have another broker license in your organization. Okay, you're going to go out there. So this just says, Mr. Seller or Mr. Buyer, I work in a brokerage firm with multiple brokers. So in the event I win the Powerball and move to Tahiti, there will be somebody else around to help you. Under defined terms, the buyer. This is where you're going to enter the buyer's names. Let me see if I can do this. And you can see that this is how it lays out when you're actually in the input screen. You want to make sure that you do this correctly. So the first box is first name, second box is middle name, third box is last name. If you're working with a company or a trust, if you click here, it'll allow you to type in the company name, Joe's Crab Shack. Sounds like a good one this morning. And then buyer template 2023 is the signatory or authorized signer or whatever their title is, right? If you're dealing with an estate, it might be executor. All right. So that's how you use that particular piece. I get asked that a lot. And so I wanted to make sure I showed that to you. You want to make sure that however you put the buyer's names in, you are aligning that with how the buyer filled out their loan application. So it's always good to have the pre-approval letter, right? But you want to know how those names appear because here's the thing. I'm going to pick on Carrie today because I've known her the longest. And so she knows that I love her, right? Is that if I just know Carrie in conversation, I might type in her name as Carrie Bell. But the reality is her name is Karen. All her legal paperwork is in Karen. So that's why I want a copy of the pre-approval letter. And I'm going to ask Carrie, how do you want your name to appear when you take title? Okay, so make sure you get that. The brokerage firm should auto-populate Keller Williams Avenues Realty LLC, as should your name, the broker. In section 3.4, you're going to write in here what you're helping the client buy. My recommendation is keep it vague. So I always like to write personal residence in Denver metro area. If they're looking at mountain property, then I might put in there, you know, personal residence in the state of Colorado or personal residence in the Front Range or something very generic, because here's what you don't want to do. This is a contract, right? And so let's, in the event that let's say we start down the path and Carrie says, well, Margaret, I want a 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch home, and it has to be in Lakewood. And we go out looking for property, and she falls in love with a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, tri-level in Arvada. Am I in contract? No, I'm not. So that's why we keep it vague, because oftentimes what buyers tell us they want and we get out and actually start looking, it's different. Make sense? Okay. 3.5.1 just defines what a purchase is, and that just means it's the acquisition of interest in real property. 3.5.2, we do not do leases at our office, so we will never, ever, ever, ever use that. Section 3.6, the listing period. The listing period of this buyer listing contract begins on, this will usually be, this first box will usually be the same as your date of your contract. Up here, wherever it is, right there. Okay. And the second one is, when is it ending? I typically write mine for 6 months, and I typically have them end on the last day of the 6th month. So if I was doing this today, which is May 20th, I would go over here and I would have it end November 30th of 2023. However, you need to know your market conditions. You need to understand, and by having that fantastic buyer consultation where you've asked lots of great questions and you really understand what your client is looking for, you may have to go longer. If they're looking for a very rare type of property, or the market conditions are such that it takes forever to get people under contract because there's multiple offers or there's no houses to buy, and all of the things, you may want to write up to a year-long contract. Okay. So that's that section. Any questions on that?
So when the buyer buys a property and they say they're under a year-long contract and they find something within a month and they buy and they're, you know, all that good stuff, and they've closed, this contract is then null and void then?
It's just continuous. It's just ended, right? So if you read the sentence, this listing period of this buyer listing consultation contract begins on 5/20/2023 and continues through the earlier of 1, completion of the purchase of property, or 2, the date.
Okay.
So once you go to closing with them, this one's over with. So if you're working with an investor, so I've got an investor right now, and we are always looking at properties. I always have to make sure every time that we write an offer that I have an active buyer agreement. Because if I've already closed one since that one, then I need a new one. I need one for every property that we actually close on. Okay. So great question. Now, there can be times where you might have a date up here of May 20th, but the reality is down here, you're going to put the date June 1st. Anybody have any ideas or thoughts of when and why that might happen? Okay, what if you are working with a buyer and that particular buyer has been working with somebody else? Maybe they've been working with Mike, right? They've been working with Mike, and Mike is just not listening to them. He's not responding to them, and they're just really unhappy. And so they have decided that they're going to terminate their agreement with Mike May 31st. If Mike doesn't get his act together by May 31st, he's done. But they love you, so they want to move to you as their buyer's agent. This is when you would sign the buyer agreement today, but it wouldn't start until June 1st. Make sense? All right. Applicability of terms. This just defines that when the abbreviation of NA or deleted is in a particular section, it voids the entire section. So you got to be careful when you're using this. The abbreviation MEC stands for mutual execution of this contract, which basically means both parties have signed, you and the buyer. Section 3.8, Mr. Buyer, this just defines what a day is, and it means that the day ends at midnight Mountain's time, whether it's standard or daylight. And in the event, in 3.8.2, you're going to check the will box. In the event that we have a contract in which we are doing MEC dates instead of hard dates, and those dates fall on a Saturday, Sunday, or a holiday, the date will automatically be moved to the next business day. You will learn in the contract to buy and sell classes that we teach you to put hard dates in. However, there are situations where you will use MEC. Backup offers is a prime example. So if you do a backup offer with a bunch of TFCs in them and you get moved into first position and it says TFC or MEC plus 7 days, and that falls on next Saturday, well, you can't go to the title company and turn in your earnest money on a Saturday, can you? So by having the will box, that deadline will automatically extend to Monday. All right, section 4. This talks about all of the different relationships. Now, I'm going to be really honest. When I'm presenting to my buyers, I go through the brokerage disclosure to buyer first, and I'll explain to you why. But this goes through it as well, right? It talks about if the buyer agency box is checked at the top, we're working as a buyer's agent. It talks about the fact that if we are an in-company transaction and I have a relationship with the buyer as a buyer's agent, and Vanessa has a relationship with the seller as a seller's agent, the brokerage firm still puts up the invisible walls to be able to maintain that separation and our loyalty to them as brokers. Section 4311. So, Mr. Buyer, I'm going to work with you in a buyer's agent. However, there is one instance where that may need to change. And that could change that. Let's say I get a new listing. And you see that listing as I'm advertising it on Facebook and you go, oh my goodness, Margaret, I really want to go see that house. And you fall in love with it. Well, I have a seller's agency relationship with the seller and I have a buyer's agency relationship to you. And in Colorado, I can't be an agent to both of you. This paragraph allows me to move to transaction broker with both of you. That's the only time that I would not be an agent on your behalf. Okay. Now, a lot of you, one of the number one mistakes I see as I'm looking at contracts for brokers is we check 4312 buyer agency only. If you check this box, you're stating that you will always be only a buyer's agent to your buyer. Well, what happens if your buyer falls in love with your listing? What has to happen? You've got to probably refer both of them out to somebody else. So the only time I want you to check buyer agency only is if you are in a situation where you cannot go to a neutral mindset, a neutral position. Probably your parents, probably your kids, probably your spouse, probably your best friend from kindergarten who's like a sister or a brother. You can't go neutral to those, right? Carrie's next door neighbor, she can go neutral. Right? Where she doesn't have any skin in the game, where she doesn't have a bias. She's comfortable with being loyal to the transaction. Okay. Brokerage duties. I'm going to encourage you all, and I encourage everyone, read all these contracts. I can't read every line to you. We'd be here till 6 o'clock tonight and y'all got work to do. Right? But section 5 talks through whether you're an agent or a transaction broker. These are all of the duties that you're going to do. You're going to present offers timely. You're going to disclose to them any material facts. You are going to keep track of the money and account for it properly. You're going to keep them informed. You're not going to disclose that the buyer is willing to pay more than the purchase price if they don't give you permission. You're not going to talk about their motivation, and you're not going to talk about things outside of what's being offered. That's true regardless of which relationship you have. So read through this section 5 so that you understand it. Mr. Buyer, additionally, because I'm a buyer's agency for you, Here's where it talks about that I am promoting your interests with the highest level of good faith, loyalty, and fidelity. I'm going to seek a price and terms that are acceptable to you, and I am going to counsel you on any risks and rewards as we're negotiating through different things. Okay? Questions on that part? All right, compensation. Do we all work hard as agents, Vanessa? The answer is yes, we do. Okay, we work very hard. We deserve to be paid.
Yes, we do. Sorry, I was away from my phone for a minute.
That's all right. I'm
I'm
kind of
still
like doing a
listening.
new
It's just
thing.
I wasn't
Go ahead.
close enough to unmute.
Got it. All right, well, just leave it off mute unless you got barking dogs or chaos behind you. That way it's easier
I
to
do
chime in.
have chaos behind me. That's why I mute it.
All righty. So in 711, you're going to check the box. And here's where you're going to disclose what your success fee is. Now, I am showing you my business. I am opening the window so you can see what I do. My fee is a minimum of 2.8% of the purchase price. I came up with that because it's a very competitive broker buyer fee that is paid in the Denver metro area. We're starting to see some more 2.5s. There is nothing wrong with you putting a fee equal to 2.5% in there. Okay, your business, your decisions, right? But this is what you're telling the buyer. My fee, my minimum fee, that's how I say it. In section 7.1, Mr. Buyer, this shows you that my minimum fee is 2.8%. As we talked about in the buyer consultation, oftentimes that is paid for by the seller, but I want you to know upfront what my minimum is. Okay. When is it earned? Well, upon the purchase of the property. If it fails to close as a result of the seller's default with no part of the buyer, the success fee will be waived. If the transaction fails to close as a result of buyer default, the success fee will not be waived and it'll be payable. Let me give you a live example. Well, fortunately, we were the seller. We had a buyer walk away the day of closing. Everything was done. Loan was approved. There was no reason the buyer decided not to close, and he did. He ultimately ended up losing his earnest money. His buyer's broker, had they filled this out properly, could have gone after that buyer for his commission. I'll never know if they did or not, but they could have, right? Other compensation, check 714. I like to write in here any other compensation or bonus offered by the seller or listing agent. Sometimes if you go into other parts of Colorado, they might offer 3%. Northern Colorado and Colorado Springs, their customary competitive is as 3% for buyers brokers. You might get with somebody who you find a contract and it says $2,000 buyer broker bonus if closed by June 30th. By putting that in there, it allows you to take it. Okay. In 724, we don't do leases, so that part doesn't matter. Now, I want to dive into this one. 7.3, who will pay the success fee? Listing brokerage firm or seller may pay, buyer is obligated to pay. How many of you are ready to have that conversation just based on that first sentence? How many of you are scared to death to say that to your buyers? I was. I didn't know how to explain it. And I actually lost a buyer because I couldn't explain it. So, Mr. Buyer, as we talked about, what we typically see is the success fee is paid by the seller. However, in the event that they do not, you're going to be obligated to make that payment. Now, I want to draw your attention, Mr. Buyer, to the second sentence of this paragraph. Broker is authorized and instructed to request payment of brokerage firm success fee from the listing brokerage firm or seller. So what that means, Carrie, is that when we write an offer, and let's say we see an offer and let's pretend it's a FSBO, a for sale by owner, and he says, I ain't paying any stinking real estate fees to anybody. Okay, if we find a property like that and it's the one for you, by me checking this box, I now have the right to ask the seller on your behalf to pay my fee. Okay. If he still refuses, we're going to write such a contract so good, you're going to be happy to pay it for me anyway. And I would literally say it like that to them. And this is true, you guys, if we don't check 731, we are not authorized to put in a contract to buy and sell to have our commission higher or paid at all by the seller. Do you know why? Who is the party of the contracts in a contract to buy and sell?
The seller and the buyer.
Seller and the buyer. So who benefits by my commission fee?
You.
I do, right? So I'm not party to the contract, right? So I can't write in the contract, if I check 733, which you all want to do, if you check 733, I don't get to ask for my fee. So I'm working for free. But by checking 731, I can now ask for my commission to be paid in the contract to buy and sell, because now who does it benefit?
The buyer.
Buyer, because he's obligated to pay it. Does that make sense? Right? Practice explaining this to your buyers. Right? Run a quick script practice back and forth with one of your real estate buddies from your group and your classes. Right? And go, hey, can we practice that? How to explain that? If you practice it, it goes a whole lot easier. Okay. So I'll do it again. Mr. Buyer, 7311 states that the seller or the listing brokerage may pay me. However, if they do not, you are obligated to do so. The important part to this paragraph is actually sentence 2, which states that by checking this box, I can then request on your behalf that my commission fee be paid by the seller. And usually they're fine with it. You just have to be you don't stumble over it and be very matter of fact, and they get it. They do want you to be paid. Your buyers do want you to be paid. Okay. Questions on that? It's a big one. If you work with a client who says, I will pay your fee, and they're going to only pay it, then you can check 732. I have done that before, by the way. Doesn't happen very often. 7.4 is a holdover period. There is no wrong answer here as to the time or if you even do it. I typically do 90 days. I think Bob does 45. I think Kevin does 120. There's no right, there's no wrong, whatever you want to put there. But this is how, first of all, the holdover period is designed to protect who?
Us.
Us, right? So what I say to my buyers is this, Mr. Buyer, the holdover period is a situation in which, in the event you purchase a property that I showed you without me, and you close on it, you're going to owe me my commission if you do that within 90 days after closing. Or 90 days, within 90 days after our listing period expires, you're going to owe me. And they get an inquisitive look, and I said, here's what that's written for. It is not uncommon for buyers to accidentally bump into sellers. They're driving by the house, they're showing it to the parents or the adult children or their best friends, and the seller's outside mowing the lawn. And they strike up a conversation, and the seller learns that you, the buyer, are getting ready to put in an offer on the house. And he says, well, you know what? I've been working with this Scott guy, and he is absolutely horrible, and I'm getting ready to fire him. So you know what? Instead of you submitting an offer with your broker, why don't you hold on for a couple of days? Let me get Scott out of the picture. And then if I don't have my broker and you don't have your broker, I can sell you the house for less money, which will ultimately save both of us money because none of the realtors get any commissions. What do you think? I literally give that example to my buyers. And they'll go, I would never do that. And I said, well, then this doesn't matter. But it does protect you guys in the event that they go under contract on a property that you had a portion of. Okay, questions on that? Okay,
Margaret, I do have a question. Those 90 days are over or are after your listing agreement ends or? Yes, right?
yes, yeah, so if your exclusive right to buy has ended just because of the number of days, and they go under contract with something that you showed them, and you gave them the submitted property list, and they go under contract and close within 90 days, absolutely, you're entitled to your commission. Or
Okay.
if they fire you, as in my example.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, good question. Limitations, section 8, limitation on third-party compensation. This just basically said that I am not going to take compensation from any business entity that I refer you to, nor am I going to receive any markups. That's what it says. So I don't have a vested interest in telling you to go with a certain lender, with a certain inspector. I don't care. I don't get anything from it. I send you to people because I know they're good at what they do. Number 9, Mr. Buyer, this particular section states that you have not currently signed an agreement with another broker like this to assist you in the purchase of a home. So we as agents are going to put is not and has not. They are not currently party to an agreement and they have not received a list of submitted properties. Now, remember that story where I don't remember who the broker was that was getting fired? Might have been Carrie, I don't remember, at the very beginning, right? Where my date of my contract was May 20th, but my listing period started June 1st. If you are in that situation, this box changes because they currently are a party to an agreement with another broker, but they may or may not yet have received a list of submitted properties, and you have to ask about that. If you get in that situation, talk to Margaret, talk to Bob, talk to Kevin, right? Talk to somebody who can help you make sure you do this. 9 years in the business, I've never had to do it. Okay, but it's a good, and this is where, you know, sometimes when we meet people at open houses and they say, nope, I don't have anything signed, or I terminated, I fired Mike last week, whatever the situation is. Sometimes we get nervous about that and we want them to, well, do you have a copy of the termination agreement, right? Can I have a copy? You don't need a copy. If they check these boxes that they are not, and they sign it and they were not completely honest with you, doesn't this contract protect you? You don't need to go through getting all the proof stuff. Okay. Section 10, default. Mr. Buyer, you know, if I do something that you're not happy with, if I'm not fulfilling the obligations that we've talked about in this agreement, you absolutely have the right to terminate this contract at any certain point in time. And I will be more than happy to do that. But my only ask is, and I'm literally doing a script right now, my only ask is that if you're not happy with something, that we have a conversation. And then in section 10.2, Mr. Buyer, this shows also how that I can terminate this contract. And a lot of times buyers will go, what do you mean you can terminate this contract? Why would you do that? Don't you want to make money? And I will say, it's rare. However, every once in a while, I will run into a buyer and it's not working. Usually it's not working because we're looking at homes that are 500,000 and we are in a multiple offer situation and all they want to do is write a $400,000 offer and get a deal. And they're not listening and they're not being prudent. They're not actually doing the things that are going to give us the chance to win. Or I'm showing 1 million houses to them that I'm showing them hundreds of homes that fit all their criteria and they just will never pull the trigger. I might decide that they're not the right buyer for me. Okay. Cost of services. Mr. Buyer, I will not order services or products on your behalf and ask you to pay for them without your permission. So when we go under contract, it's very common for my team to help you with the coordination of maybe your inspections, maybe your title reports, maybe a survey if we need it, or an ILC, but we will never order those without your permission to do it on your behalf. Okay. 12.1 brokerage services. You guys, this is where you're going to say what you're going to do contractually for this buyer. So if you want to steal what I have written there, steal away. I'll leave it on the screen long enough so you can take pictures of it. This does come directly out of the MREA, in case you're wondering where I got it. But I'm going to analyze your wants and needs, right? I'm going to do a great buyer consultation. I'm going to create an online neighborhood search profile for you. I'm going to organize and schedule home search processes and tours. I'm going to present your offer. I'm going to negotiate on your behalf. Excuse me. I'm going to provide pre-closing consulting. I'm going to preview closing documents because I always want to make sure those settlement statements are right. And I'm going to help you complete the transaction. Okay. You guys decide what you're going to do. If you're not going to preview closing documents, then don't put it in the contract. If you're not going to present the offers, then don't put it in the contract. Now, that's a little extreme, I realize, but just be aware of what you're putting in there. Okay. 12.2, showing properties. I'm going to do everything I can, Mr. Buyer, to show you the homes that you want to see. However, there are certain things and there's certain limitations that I might have in being able to access those properties. For my contracts, I always put the daily code access via lockbox. If I can't get a lockbox code, I can't get in. Now, I don't put it in my contract, but you could. I don't show homes after dark. Right? Because let's think about it. How good does it, how well can you see the foundation as you walk around the outside? The sun's have gone down. You can't. I don't make it part of my contract because every once in a while there's some scenario where we can do it and it makes sense, especially in the wintertime. So I talk about it. I know some brokers will put in there that they don't show homes on Sunday mornings. Again, I don't put that in there because the minute I do will be there was some exception that I go on a Sunday morning. But I do talk to my clients about those kind of limitations. Okay. And then the second half of 12.2 is what MLS do you belong to? I belong to the Denver RE Colorado, so I put Denver MLS. If you also belong to Colorado Springs, you would put PPAR or Pikes Peak. If you belong to the Northern Colorado one, known as IRIS, and I don't even know what the I stands for, right? You would put that in here. So if you belong to, so if Bob was filling this out, he would have Denver, PPAR, IRIS, and Summit County. Number 13, disclosure of buyer's identity. Mr. Buyer, this just states that I have the right to say your name. And it's going to show up in the contract anyway. So 99% of the time, you guys, this is going to be a does. That being said, let's pretend that your client is Peyton Manning. Is he going to necessarily want you to disclose that his name is Peyton, that it's Peyton Manning? Why not, Mike?
Because he wants to keep what his financial dealings are secret.
Exactly, right? Oh, it's Peyton Manning. Let's double the price
I'm
to
gonna
the
charge
house.
him
He
more.
can afford it,
Absolutely.
right? No, we're not going to fix this structural deal. It's Peyton Manning. He's got millions, right? I do have a client that says does not have buyer's permission. And they are two very high profile individuals. But the tricky part is, depends on how they're buying it. Like if they're buying the property as an LLC and one of them is signing their name as the authorized signer, did we not just disclose their name? Right? If Peyton is my client, which darn it, he's not, but if it was him and he says do not, and then we go, okay, let's buy it in an LLC, and the LLC is omaha.com LLC, and then it says Peyton Manning authorized signer, didn't I just give it away?
Mm-hmm.
right? But if it's Omaha, Omaha by Vanessa Ramirez, authorized signer, does anybody know who it is? So oftentimes if they're doing the does not, it includes that they're not even signing the paperwork. Someone in their entourage of their financials and legal people are actually signing on behalf of whatever trust or LLC they're buying it under. How many of you are going, that could be a fun problem to have? All right, disclosure settlement services. Buyer acknowledges that there's going to be costs. There's going to be title insurance fees. There's going to be inspection fees. There's going to be all kinds of fees, right? Wire and other frauds. This just talks about wire fraud. I do go in a little deeper on wire fraud just because it's so prevalent in our industry. And I tell them, I will never, or nor will anyone on my direct team ever ask you for wiring instructions or send you wiring instructions. If you're going to wire money to the title company, I want you to call the title company directly with the phone number I give you, not necessarily a different number that appears on an email. So make sure you're talking to your clients about wire fraud often. Number 16, buyer. This just states that any marketing material used by the seller or their broker is not yours. You cannot use them. You cannot download them from Zillow or the MLS and use them for any personal reasons. You also need to understand that it is not easy and is unlikely, if not impossible, for the listing agent to remove the full photos after closing from all of these outside syndicators. We can't do it. We're not in control, right? So they can try, but just understand no one may be able to get it, and there is no liability if they can't. Non-discrimination, Mr. Buyer, we agree that we are not going to discriminate in any way, shape, or form that violates fair housing laws. So I don't care if we discover that the seller is purple with pink polka dots and lived on Jupiter. It doesn't matter. This is a business agreement and everything is done based on business, not based on anything else. Mr. Buyer, in the event there's anything in this contract that is not clear, either by the way I have described it or as you read through it, please, before you sign it, make sure that you reach out and get legal advice. Or if they want tax advice, like for 1031 exchanges, get them to the professionals. I know we like to pretend that we're lawyers because we get to act like them a little bit when we fill out these contracts. And the reality is we are not attorneys. Okay. Mr. Buyer, it doesn't happen often, but there's always a chance that somehow you and I get in a dispute. And if it becomes a dispute that you and I cannot come to an agreement on, our first step to an agreement is to go to mediation. In mediation, we agree to split the cost of the mediator, and we both agree to work in good faith to solve that. In the event we are unable to solve that in section 20, and we do end up going to court, basically whichever party loses will pay the attorney's fees for everybody else. That's literally how I explained 19 and 20. 21, additional provisions. If you're in CTM, you will see that there is this section called clauses. I actually taught not long ago a contracts class for dual career, so I'm guessing the recording is out there somewhere, but we go through what every single one of these clauses means, okay? But one of the clauses that I just have as part of my template is I use a transaction coordinator. And this is just disclosing to my buyer that my transaction coordinator is unlicensed and that they agree that she will be receiving their information. Okay. Yes, my coordinator is my daughter. Do you guys know what a transaction coordinator is? Do you have any questions on what that means? Carrie's saying no, but she's been to these classes a few times. Scott, Mike, do you know what the role is?
Not particularly.
Okay, so transaction coordinator is someone who basically takes the file after it's under contract and does all of the activities to the closing table. So they will help your buyers organize inspections. They will upload the documents. They will take the seller disclosures that the seller's agent sends to you, and they will send them to the buyer on your behalf. Basically, they do all of the high detailed paper pushing that we all are really bad at. They'll schedule closings. They take care of the paperwork. Vanessa, what else does Andy do? She does a ton for you too. They just are a great coordinator. They'll remind you of dates and deadlines. I think that's a big one, right? Getting a notification from the transaction coordinator, hey, the appraisal is due tomorrow, and then you just have to go, yeah, it's back.
Yes, and
Right.
she's really good at reminding you about dates and deadlines and
Yep.
sending anything needed from CTM.
Yep, super helpful, right?
to
So in
title
our
or to
office,
Buyers or whatever, you know.
yeah. And if you got a listing, she'll actually input your listing for you as well. So then we have two in the office. So Andrea is my daughter. I always disclose that because I don't want anyone to ever think there's any kind of conflict of interest happening there. She's got a nice little business and does a really nice job. A second transaction coordinator that we have in the market center is Trevor Kola. Trevor is a licensed broker. And so, you know, he can write contracts and help, or Andy cannot. Their services are similar, but very different. If you're interested in talking with either one or both, reach out. I'm happy to share the contact information with both of them. I will just say this, I have never not had one. And I can't imagine my life without one. There's too much, I just can't imagine uploading documents, but
I had one without one just because it was a piece of land that was 3,000, so I didn't think it was worth to pay since I was really not going to be getting any commission out of it. And I tried doing it all by myself, and it was very, very difficult. Like there's a lot behind it.
that there is. Thank you for that. Good. All right, attachments. Attachments are always going to be the brokerage disclosure to buyer and the buyer advisory, and I'm going to show you those documents today. You might also have in there, if you're co-listing the buyer with another agent, you would have your co-listing addendum in there. Those are pretty much the attachments. 24, some of this starts to get crazy. 24 talks about what's considered delivery. Well, there's handing somebody a physical piece of paper, and there's electronic. And this talks about anything that's received at their electronic address, either by facsimile, fax, which I don't know why I put that in there anymore, email, or blank. I leave it blank. Some people don't like to leave it blank or NA, so you could put CTME in there if you're using CTM. Choice of law just states that this contract and all the associated documents are covered by the state of Colorado, even if the party does not live here. We cannot modify this. The entire agreement is covered by the listing contract. We're going to give them a copy. And then I always just go to the bottom and I will say, Mr. Buyer, are you familiar with Megan's Law? Some are, some aren't. And I just say, Megan's Law is basically the sex offender law. If knowing information about sex offenders in the neighborhood that you're purchasing, I cannot give you that information. There's a website where you can go look it up, or you can contact the local police department in the area. But I cannot share that information with you. And I'm going to tell you guys this, don't you go look. Okay, just don't look. All right, then they sign it and you sign it. And that is the exclusive right to buy. Questions, thoughts, comments before I go into the other two documents? Nothing? Okay. I like it. All right, I'm gonna do this way. Uh-oh. This is not gonna work because it flipped them upside down.
Yep.
So I had one question about the document. When I go to an open house should I bring this form with me in case there is a buyer, or bring a blank copy of this?
I do not take a blank exclusive right to buy with me to open houses. Now, that being said, I always have an iPad or a laptop with me if I have to go to a coffee shop. Mainly because I want the pre-approval and I want to make sure I have their names right and all of that. Now, I do know that Bob does have with him at his open houses, and I think it's a great idea. He'll bring either the brokerage disclosure to buyer or the definitions of working relationships to have there to be able to explain to people the different relationships that we can have with consumers. But I wouldn't bring the exclusive right with me, no. Plus, as new agents, you guys have to have your stuff reviewed by someone before you have anybody sign it anyway. You knew that, right?
Right.
Okay. All right. Good question. Anything else? All right. So the other form is the brokerage disclosure to buyer. This is a commission form. And honestly, since it ran everything upside down, I'm just going to pull it up out of CTM. Actually, I can do it right here because I think I pulled it. It's Saturday morning. Can you tell? All right, so here's a brokerage disclosure to buyer. This is the form when I am presenting to my buyers, I go over first. And it sounds like this. Mr. Buyer, this form is showing you all of the various relationships that a real estate professional can have with a consumer. The first one is the agent relationship. And you'll notice there's a seller's agent and a buyer's agent. And the reason that these two are broken out separately is that the agent relationship is one that basically the agent is working for only that party to the contract, either for the seller or the buyer. In our case, it would be the buyer's agent. And as a buyer's agent, working in an agent relationship, this just means that you are my number one in this. I am working for you, always on your behalf, and I am your advocate. Think of it like this. When we have, it depends on what sport it is, but football is my favorite. It's football season, and each team has their own coach. And those coaches have done all their homework about the team on the other side. And the coach sees something, the players come out and line up, and he sees something that he saw when he was scouting it, and he calls a timeout because he brings his players over to the sideline and goes, this is what they're going to do, and they figure out how to play against what was just presented to them. That is a coach. I am always working in your best interest. The second level of relationship is the transaction broker. The transaction broker can work with one or both sides of the party in the transaction broker relationship status. And as a transaction broker, I'm honestly more loyal to the transaction than I am the client. Now, doesn't mean that I'm not going to care, because I still have to treat everybody fairly, but I can't give you that advice. I can't talk to you about rewards. I can't talk to you about risks. I can't be your advocate. I can still present offers on your behalf, and I can say to you, okay, we need to fill out the inspection objection. Let's talk through how we want to do that. And I'm going to help you, but I'm not going to advise you. Go back to the football field. You know that referee? Does he really care what side of which team wins the game? No. He only cares that the game ends on time and both parties play fairly. The final role is the customer role. And the customer is basically an unrepresented party. That's how I fill it out. That's how I explain it. When I do it that way, which role do you think they want?
Agency.
The agency, right? So many times, agents, I'm not even going to say new agents, agents have a hard time wanting to get sitting down and doing a buyer agency agreement with a buyer. They're scared of it. However, when I fill this out this way and I go through it, do you think they're ready to sign it really quickly? Because as they're out there maneuvering in the multiple offer situation, don't they want me advocating for them? Don't they want to win the house they just fell in love with? So this, when it's presented like that, I have found consistently, time over time over time, I get people saying, how do I get that first one? Okay, so just a helpful hint. That's a great way to explain those relationships when you're also at an open house. Inside our buyer agreement or our buyer packet that we give to new buyers, we actually have this written out and explained. So we talk about the relationships even in the consultations. We don't wait till contract to do it. Okay. All right. So if you're filling this out, you will notice it says under the line, it says buyer, broker and buyer referenced below have not entered into a buyer agency agreement. The working relationship specified below is for specific property. So 98% of the time, you're not going to fill most of this page out. The only time you would do this is if you were the listing agent and an unrepresented buyer came in and they wanted you to fill out the contract for that specific property. Then you would go here. Okay. The one box we do check here is that we're a multiple person firm. So always on this form, check the multiple person firm. You're going to skip this part unless you're working with somebody who's a customer. And then down below, these are literally the number one correction I write when I am reviewing contracts. Number one, buyer acknowledges receipt of this document on, and there's a blank. You need to fill in the blank. And what you're going to put there is the date you're providing them the disclosure. And then they'll sign it. Under broker acknowledgement, on the date. So again, the date you provided it, broker provided to, and it'll come over and give you the customer's name with this document via, how did you give it to them? Did you physically print it out and sign it with them with an ink and pen? Did you send it to them electronically? So if it's a physical, like at the open house, Scott, where you've got several of them there, right? You would hand them a physical one. You could have those all pre-populated with physical delivery. Okay. If I'm emailing it to them as part of the packet through CTM, and we're going to review it as we're going through the contracts before they sign them, I'm going to just say electronic delivery. The other thing that agents do with this is they'll take this other form. Let me hide all your beautiful faces for a millisecond. They will take this definitions of working relationships, and they literally have this form, either a stack of them at the where they do the sign-ins at the open houses, or they will print it and just have it in like a frame at their open houses. So again, if somebody asks what the relationships are, you've got it there on display. Okay. Questions on brokerage disclosure to buyer? Nothing? It's gonna be the fastest contracts class ever. You guys are too quiet. All right. I think I put it in here. I was scrambling this morning getting everything ready because the contracts changed. Nope. We'll just create one. So Damian Cox also has a form. He's got all these different advisories and stuff. So we want the buyer advisory residential. And so this is what it looks like. There's nothing for you to fill out on it. Nothing. But your buyers do need to sign it. So when I present to my buyers, I do the brokerage disclosure to buyer. Then I do the exclusive right to buy, and I end with this. And I just say, Mr. Buyer, this document, I really encourage you to read through it. I know it's 6 pages, but here's what I love about it. It explains to you everything that can possibly happen in a transaction. And I'll scroll it. It talks about what happens in the event of an earnest money dispute. It talks about wire fraud. It talks about your right to do an inspection and the different hazards. It talks about septic systems and sources of water and insects. It talks about stigmatized property and how we may not know if a property has had something to happen in it that would stigmatize it, like, you know, maybe there was a death in it, maybe there's ghosts that live there, right? There's a million things, right? We don't, that is not something that has to be disclosed in the state of Colorado. So we may not know if the seller decides not to disclose it. Talks about surveys, it talks about short sales and insurance and warranties and your HOA docs and special taxing. Mr. Buyer, there is so much information here. I strongly encourage you to read this. Guess who else I'm going to strongly encourage to read that form?
Us.
Every single one of you. It is, Damien has covered so much. And yes, Damien's an attorney, but that form is not really written like a bunch of legalese. But it's very, very helpful to go through it, right? And you're still gonna have questions, right? But that's to be expected. Okay. All right, we're done. How many of you are ready to write your first buyer agency? Can do it perfectly the first time. Well, I like laughter.
You're funny, Margaret. Oh,
How
I have a
many
quick
of you,
question.
okay, let me ask the question differently.
Go ahead.
How many of you feel more prepared to write a buyer contract today at 10 to 15 than you did at 8:59 this morning? Good, one of you, mission accomplished. All right, somebody had a question.
Yeah, I have a question. How much does a transaction coordinator typically run you in a deal? Is it a
So it
percentage?
depends.
Wow.
I don't even, oh, Vanessa, I don't even know what Andy charges anymore. It's under $500. I want to
Okay.
say for listings, she charges 400 and
Yeah, her
buyers,
prices just went up, so I'm not sure.
I think, she went up to 400 on listings. I think it's 300 and 400.
Okay.
I don't know what Trevor charges. Because their services are different. Like they don't do exactly the same thing. The big rocks they do, like they both upload your documents and those things, but like I don't know that Trevor helps schedule anything. I don't know. I've never used him, but I know he's good. So as is Andy. So if you're interested, I can get you their contact information and you can reach out to either or both of them and build a relationship with them and put them to work.
Yeah.
Money well spent. Like Vanessa said, she didn't make any money on that little property, and she, in hindsight, probably would have given up her entire commission to pay Andy so she didn't have to do all that work.
Well, yeah, it seems like one of those things like you're trying to chase good money after a bad habit almost. Like why learn to do all that stuff for a couple $100 and save yourself the time and headache of learning, even just learning how to do all that stuff. Like how much time are you going to spend? Like how valuable is your own personal time?
Well, especially
the way
being
I
dual
look at it.
career.
Especially being dual career, right? Although I
Absolutely.
think you're really the only true dual career here, Carrie.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I didn't invite the rest of the coaching clients, you and I would have had a one-on-one for 2 hours. Lucky you. You're so right. And here's the thing, Mike, like somebody said to me, well, Margaret, you never learned how to do it as a new agent. I said, well, yeah, and it changed since I was a new agent. Like we changed systems.
Mhm.
And you know what? If I had to do it, do you think I could figure it out?
Yeah.
I mean,
I
sure.
could, right? If
Yeah.
I absolutely had to, I could figure it out or find somebody who can help me figure it out.
Right.
But I
But-
am much better served going out and finding new
Another
clients,
client. Absolutely.
right? Find more clients. Don't worry about learning how to upload documents and add buyer names to disclosures in CTM. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
It's all important.
Right. But you're going to spend an entire work week doing it. That's a 40-hour work week. Like how much, again, like I said, like how much is your time worth? Is it worth 25, 50 bucks an hour to you? Well, then you should turn around and pay that money to somebody else and gain back your work week and spend it doing something else.
Well, exactly. And as brokers, do you know what our hourly rate really is?
I would anticipate it's not as much as we think.
I'll bet it's more than you think.
Yeah.
Mhm. What do you think? What do you think if you took your commission check on an average deal for a $600,000 house?
Let's see, I gotta figure out what
What
that
do you
amount is
think
even.
what do you think your rate would be per hour on an average? I'm just curious. Let's play a poll.
So you probably put in, I mean, I guess I don't know how many hours go into the average closing of a deal. Would be probably a big thing. I don't really know. I have nothing to compare it to, I
How
guess.
many do you think it's less than $100 an hour?
Oh, I wouldn't think that.
Okay, I wasn't sure because you said 25 to 50. Okay, how many of you think it's less than $500 an hour?
Maybe.
I think it's
Exactly.
less than 500.
It's somewhere between, depending on the deal, it can run $400 to $600 an hour.
Yeah.
400 to 600 bucks an hour. Yeah, I can pay a TC. Right? So, yeah. It's like my friend Mike, who used to love to gamble, and sometimes we'd have to pull him off the blackjack table because we would tell him he was using good money to chase
Good
bad.
to face bad money. Yep, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned that because I know that's where that comes from.
There you go. Any other questions? Any other questions about anything?
So how do you justify the $500 an hour and keep people from going to straight over to a lawyer to write their contracts and stuff for them? If you're trying to
Because he's
go
going to charge
against-
them that much and not walk them to a house and show it to them.
Because I do more than just write the contract.
And it's building that relationship.
Yes. I mean, so as a buyer's broker, first of all, I'm out showing them properties. I've got my finger
Well,
on the
say it was a
pulse.
seller, though. Say you're on the sell, you're representing a seller.
Okay.
You're not
So
showing
if
a
I'm
seller
representing the
property.
seller, is the attorney going to market the property?
Well, probably not. But if
Okay.
it's a for sale by owner, maybe he's trying to go low budget.
Well, so a for sale by owner may go down that path, right? Or hasn't even thought about what he's going to do from a contract perspective. But a for sale by owners, most serious buyers are not out driving neighborhoods looking for sale by owner sites.
Right.
For sale by owners typically lose somewhere north of 15 to 20%. Had they used a realtor, they would get more. For sale by owners have a higher likelihood of being sued than somebody who uses a realtor.
For like discrimination and such.
Non-disclosure, like a million things,
Right.
millions of things. Buyers will sue for anything. Most for sale by owners who try it end up using a broker to sell their property. So how do I justify my commission? First of all, I have to pay a buyer broker 2.8%. Because by the way, I pay what I expect to get paid. Right? So 2.8% of it's going to go to a buyer broker. The other half of that goes for me marketing the property. That comes with my expenses of having the MLS, the expenses of me hiring a professional photographer and a drone and all of the marketing expenses and all of the open houses that I'm going to host and all of those other things. So yeah, I can absolutely I can justify my 6% commission.
I have a question with you actually concerning that. What if you were going to offer a 5% commission to a person? How would you then turn around and one, list that in MLS, and what would you offer like the buyer's brokers?
So I'm going to list it in the MLS the same way I listed any other deal. I mean, just because I choose to take, you know, in my
Yes.
business, I do 6%.
Mhm.
Some brokers do 5.5, 5, whatever. I mean, everybody gets to run their own business, right?
Right.
My belief is that if I choose to discount my rate, that's not the buyer's broker fault.
Gotcha.
Now, here's how I explain to the seller when he says, well, you know, I don't want to pay 6%. So let's knock it down to 5.5 and let's just pay that buyer broker 2.25% or 2%. right? Because I like you, Margaret, but those buyer's brokers aren't going to do anything for me. And what I say to them is this, you're absolutely right. We could advertise it that way. Here's my concern. Remember, when you have buyer's agents who are a professional buyer's agent like myself, they have a contract with that buyer, and oftentimes that buyer has an agreement to pay them 2.5 or 2.8% minimum. And if you, the seller, are not paying that, the buyer has to make it up to the buyer broker. So there are buyers out there who, especially if they're in, crunching every dollar just to be able to get to the closing table and the costs and the down payment and all the other big money they're coming up with, having to pay their broker part of his commission may be the difference between them being able to buy your home and not buy your home.
Mhm.
And so what those buyers will do is they will tell their agent, look, if they're not paying 2.8%, I don't want to see the house.
Makes
And
sense.
isn't it more important, instead of saving 0.3 or 0.5% on the commission, to make sure that every possible buyer who would have an interest in your home comes to look at it? Do we want to chase away prospective buyers over 0.5%?
That makes sense. Okay.
And all of a sudden they're like going, you're right, Margaret, I don't want to do that. Because they know the more eyeballs that are on the property and the more people that come to look at the property, what's the end result going to be?
Quicker sale.
Quicker sale, hopefully multiple offers. Hopefully we can drive the auction effect and move it up. They don't want to take that risk. What else you got? These are good questions. I like it. You guys are being tough this morning.
That's all I got.
Yeah, that's all I had. I've been trying to get a number of different people's perspectives on how they're justifying 5%, 6%, 7%, 8%, stuff like that.
I think it's when you understand as an agent and believe that you're worth it. Right? And you look at everything we do. Right? From showing properties to identifying the risks and rewards. If I'm working with a buyer, the risks and rewards of every situation, helping them strategize and put together the best possible offer to get them into that property, and knowing our contract, right? Part of the reason that an attorney is knowledgeable is because of what?
They
One
know the
is
contract.
title, but second of all, you would hope that they have the ability to strategize things, right? Well, as buyers brokers, that's our number one thing, right? Our knowledge of the contracts and our ability to use those contracts in the best interest of our clients, and writing it in such a way that gives them the highest level of protection, and understanding the strategies to give them the best chance to win. You start getting into a contract to buy and sell negotiation, and you're going escalation clauses, waivers of appraisal gap coverages. What do I do with the post-closing occupancy agreement? There is a lot of pieces and moving parts that you have to structure to get yourself a deal that's going to come together. Then it's the ability to negotiate inspection and understand what makes sense and how to draft that, and how to work with the agent on the other side to get what you want. There's the understanding of the settlement statements and enough information on the title work to identify where there's risks associated with it, right? There's so much more we do than unlocking doors and filling in blanks on contracts. And understanding those dynamics makes a huge difference. Plus having the resources, right? Who's your inspectors? Who's your structural engineer guy? If you come across something, do you have the extended team that you know, love, and trust to be able to help your client figure out what makes sense? Because I will tell you, a bad inspector will kill the deal faster than anything you've ever met. Okay. Helpful?
Absolutely.
Still look like you're not sure, Scott.
Nope, I'm good.
All right. Okay, so I want to talk about, we're talking about buyers today. And you know, I dedicated to be here 2 hours and I always want to give you guys your full value. And so we don't have to talk about just contracts, but a couple of things I do want to share with you is that, you know, let's say you got a buyer, because I heard a couple of you saying I'm working with one. And so you take them out and you show them the house. And I'm hoping that you're coming to Bob's Know Before You Go classes on either, for those of you that aren't dual career, during the week, the first week of the month, or the first Saturday of the month. And, you know, there's a lot of things Bob talks about, right? He talks about, I jumped on one time, he was talking about, you know, looking at electrical panels, and another one, he was talking about expansive soils and just things to look for as you're getting ready to go out and show property. But what do you do when you're out with that buyer and they're walking out the door and they look at you and they say, write it up? You go, oh, holy garbage, call my coach.
I
Right?
did that.
Which many do, right? Holy garbage, what do I do next? But I'm just going to share with you some tips and best practices when you have that client who says that, right? So you're out with a buyer, you know, they're already pre-approved and you know the house is already in the budget because you don't show properties to people that they can't afford. Number one rule. Okay. So you're driving away. He or she has said, write it up. So I usually, as I'm pulling away, I'm dialing the listing agent. And I'm calling the listing agent for a multitude of reasons. The first one is I want to build rapport with them. I want to develop a relationship with them. I am the nicest person in the world when I make this call. Because if I'm a jerk and I'm in a multiple offer situation, do you think they'll remember that I was a jerk?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And if I'm a jerk at the point when I'm presenting an offer for my buyer, what do you think I'm going to become after the fact? A raving loon, right? So I'm very nice, I'm very professional, and I'll call up the listing agent and I have a series of questions that I ask. Okay. Now, if I can tell it's been a super hot property, and I'm guessing that they probably have multiple buyer's agents calling them, they'll answer the phone and I'll just say, hey, Scott, it's Margaret over Keller Williams. Just got done showing your house over here on Elm Drive. Fantastic property. Hey, I got to imagine your phone is ringing off the hook. How you holding up? I care about Scott, right? How you holding up? Because I have been on the other side of that. I think Carrie might have been around that one weekend. I had a property, like my phone wouldn't stop ringing. I wanted to throw it out the window or in Stanley Lake, one of the two, because I couldn't take it anymore. Like it was just crazy. How you holding up, Scott? I care about you, buddy. Right? That's what I'm saying, right? And I'll start a dialogue, you know, great house. How's the activity been? Looks like, you know, showings have been good. I'm trying to get Scott to talk to me. Okay. And I'll say, well, hey, my buyer is really interested in it. As a matter of fact, they're talking about it. They just went to go get coffee. I'm headed home to just, you know, run a few comps and start getting ready to put some stuff together. Talk to me a little bit about the seller as far as other than price. What's really important to your seller right now for any contract that they get? And I stopped talking because I want to know things. Like I want him to tell me, or I want her to tell me, well, you're right, price is important, but the reality is they have not yet found their replacement home, and you know they're going to need a post-closing occupancy. Awesome. Now, with that, would it be better if I did a little bit longer close and a shorter post-closing occupancy agreement? Or do they need the money and to be completely closed and then a longer post-closing occupancy agreement? I want to know those things because it's all going to fall into my strategy of how I write that offer. It might be, oh, they've got a new build and they're scheduled to close on July 15th. Great. Do we just want to close on July 13th? Would that be better? Or would it be better for them if we closed on June 30th and just did a couple of weeks post-closing? Right? I'm always trying to figure out what's important. They might also say, hey, this is investor. They need to get to the table as fast as possible so they can move on to their next project. Now, this one wants a fast close. Right? So now I'm going to call my lender and say, hey, can we close in 3 weeks? Can we close in 14 days, 12 days? What can we do? They might say, I got to tell you, they really don't want to move that piano. It would be really nice if somebody would include an offer that includes that baby grand piano. Okay, good to know. You're going to learn things, right? So that find out what's important to the seller. Because here's the thing. If they tell you, we had one where the seller couldn't close until a specific date because of the 2-year rule on taxes. So we wrote in the MLS and we've verbalized, seller cannot close. Seller must close after July 2nd. We wrote it in the MLS and everything. Do you know how many offers we got that we had closings for June 20th?
People don't
You just
read.
showed me you're not listening and you don't care what I'm telling you. But by asking all these questions, and if I can draft the offer that is the seller's perfect storm, does that give me a higher chance of winning? All day long, right? Then I'm going to ask Scott. I'm going to say, so Scott, with offers, talk to me a little bit about timing. When are you planning to review offers with the seller? Are you sitting down and reviewing everyone as they come in? Or are you planning to get together at a specific time? Again, what are they going to do? I'm not going to write an offer that if they say, well, we've got an appointment already on the books. We're meeting at 4 o'clock on Monday. We're asking for acceptance times to be 9 o'clock Monday night. Well, if I write an acceptance time of Sunday night, what was I just become?
Null and void.
A jerk, right? A bully, right? I can be a bully in other ways, but I need to listen. Now, can I always do everything they tell me? No, but I'm going to try and work as many of those in, knowing what's important. Then my last question to Scott is this. So have you gotten any offers yet? Because now Scott's realizing I care about him. I care about the seller. Now I want to say, so do you have any offers yet? And he's going to tell me, hopefully. And hopefully I can get him to tell me what the best one is. You would be surprised how many agents will squeal like a baby pig. Well, right now, Margaret, I've got 3 offers. The best one is, well, let's just call it, well, it's about 21,000 over list price. Okay, it's 21,000 over list price. And, you know, they gave us a short closing and they didn't give us a post-closing occupancy agreement, but, you know, financially, that's the best one. And I'll say, great. Okay. You got any threats of anything else coming in? No, not really. Great. Okay. And then I'll just carry on to the next conversation, right? I'm trying to find out what I'm trying to beat. So I know what's important to the seller. And I also know what they have. Now, sometimes I don't have to beat on price because if I can get some of these other terms to work, I can maybe get it and not be the highest price. It happens all the time. Highest offer doesn't always win. The last question I asked Scott is this. So Scott, one last question, and then I'll let you go. What are you and your seller's thoughts on escalation clauses? Now, I only ask that if it's a known multiple offer. If it's a property that's been sitting on the market for 90 days and they don't have any offers, I'm not asking that question. But the reason I ask that question, if I am in a multiple offer situation or expecting to be, some agents hate them. They just want highest and best. Don't play any games. Come in with your best offer. I don't want your escalation clauses. Other agents will say, they're great. I write them all the time. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to put an escalation clause or not going to recommend that my buyer write an escalation clause to a seller or a listing agent who hates them. Because guess what? They're not going to want to deal with me. Is that helpful, you guys? Second thing, you go home, run some comps. I'm not telling you to do a great deep CMA analysis, but pull up the subject property and look in the neighborhood for similar size and style homes and at least look to see what they're selling for. Is the listing age, is the list price in the ballpark? Because I'm gonna tell you this, not every listing agent knows how to price a home. Or not every seller listens to their listing agent. So don't always assume that it's the right price. Go do a little bit of homework. So I'll go do some homework when I'm consulting with my buyer. I'll say, okay, Rand, I just did a quick glance. I never say I did a CMA. I did a quick glance. Looks like they've got it priced high, low, appropriately, whatever. I like to use fairly. And I'll say, however, based on what I'm seeing, I'd be totally comfortable with an offer between X and Y. The reason I'm doing that, I'm using a little bit of appraiser brain, but I want to tell, I'm not going to tell my buyer, offer this, offer 535. Because if I think that we could get an appraisal to 550, I'm going to tell them that. The house is listed at 525, 530. I'd be comfortable go with an offer up to 550. I think we could still get it to appraise. I still think that would be a fair number. Always talking through with my buyers where I think they could go and talk about the risks, talk about the rewards. And oh, by the way, because I'm an agent and I have an agency relationship and I got all that information from Scott, I can say to my buyer, talk to the listing agent. Right now, they've got 2 offers in. He did tell me their highest offer is, he said about 21,000. Nothing's ever about 21,000. It's probably 21,000 over the list price. So 525 plus 21, they're probably sitting around 546. Okay, I'm looking at this. I could totally see 550, even a little bit more, being able to appraise based on the comps. He told me that the post-closing occupancy agreement or being in the house is this important. So now I'm telling my buyer everything I learned so that my buyer can make an educated decision with me as his partner or her partner to write a competitive offer. You see how that all plays together? Okay. I write my offer. Before I finish my offer and have my buyer sign it, I'm calling my lender partner. Because when I submit my offer, the other thing I'm going to send with it is the pre-approval letter from my lender partner. Now, I use Mitch Friedman in the Market Center. He's a fantastic lender. If you have not met him and talked to him, spend some time with him. Get to know Mitch. If I give you homework for this week, that's your homework. Okay, get to know Mitch. He will write a property specific offer letter for you to submit. Okay, so he's going to, your lender should send you a pre-approval letter and you're going to upload that into CTM, into Docs Management. They'll teach you how to do that through their classes. So when you send your offer in, you're also going to send the pre-approval letter. Also make sure that as you're writing the offer, one of the questions to this day, I've worked with Mitch for 9 years. I know what he does. But before I finalize it, I'll say, okay, Mitch, we're looking at a closing date of June 20th, which means loan availability is going to be June 13th. And I've got the appraisal deadline of June 9th. Are you good with those dates? And that way, Mitch can't ever say, Margaret, you gave me dates I couldn't hit. So double check the appraisal and the loan dates and the closing date with your lender partner to make sure they're comfortable with what you're putting in the contract. And if they can do better than that, they're going to tell you. But again, they're a partner, right? Lender partners help us win offers. So I submit over to the listing agent. I got my signed offer, signed by me, it's signed by my buyer. I got my pre-approval letter, got it all uploaded in CTM. So I'm just going to send them to the CTM and be done. Nope. 2 things. Let's write an email to the listing agent. Because when you get a bunch of offers, I mean, how many offers, how many pages is the contract to buy and sell? It's over 20, right? There's a lot of things to dig through. So maybe you write a template for your business, right? And it says, please find attached our offer from our buyers for a property at 12345 Main Street. Here's a few offer highlights. What would I put in offer highlights? Purchase price, loan type, closing date. If I got a client, anything that's good, right? Anything that I think is positive for my buyers, I want to call out, right? We're putting $100,000 down. They've waived the appraisal, or they've put in an escalation clause to this amount. They're flexible on their closing date. They put a post-closing occupancy agreement in for, with no rent charges to the seller. Like whatever that, all those strategies that you mush together, lay them out. Because Scott's phone hasn't stopped ringing, remember? Did I just make it easier by saying, here's the highlights?
Mhm.
He already knows what he has. Then my next paragraph, I'm going to talk about the lender. My preferred lender, Mitch Friedman from CMG Home Loans, will be giving you a call. By the way, make sure they do. Right, so make sure your lender partner, whoever it is, I always hit the submit button. I text Mitch and say, I just sent the offer over, and he times it. So he calls about 15 minutes after I hit it, the send button. Because that gives Scott time to know that my offer's in and Mitch isn't calling him before he even had a chance to see it. But I'll put in there, Mitch Friedman from CMG Home Loans, my preferred lender, will be calling you. I've attached the pre-approval letter from him. You'll notice that, CMG is a local lender. I've worked with Mitch for 9 years, or our office has worked with Mitch for multiple years, however you want to word it. We want to talk about a little bit about the lender. Not a lot, don't oversell it. Then my last comment is, let me tell you a little bit about my buyer. Now, we don't do love letters, right? Because love letters can get us into fair housing problems. But who should know what fair housing is? So I will tell them a little bit about my client. Now, first of all, they're going to know if it's a single or a double, right? If there's two names on the offer or one. So I will put on there, my buyer is highly qualified. If they're a first-time home buyer, I will call it out, right? They're super excited to have been able to save $100,000 to be able to purchase their first home. When they were in the home, they couldn't stop talking about how much they loved the backyard, the apple trees, the window, the whatever the thing was that they loved about the house. So all I've said is my buyer has worked hard to save the money. Okay. I might say if they're in the medical field, I will tell what they do. Like if they're in the medical field, or they're in education, or they have a professional career. If I have someone like that, I'm going to talk about it. Back when love letters were really popular and still okay, I remember writing one because I had a couple who was buying a home to help take care of his mom, who was having some health issues, who was going to live with them. And when we were at the house, all they talked about was how her little dog, whose name I can't remember, they could just envision that little puppy sitting in the window watching everybody walk by. I told that story, right? This is what they said at the house, that they could see their dog running in the backyard chasing the bunnies, or whatever it is, right? Start pulling some emotional attachment, because as listing agents, our sellers will ask us, what do you know about them? Well, I don't know anything about them, but they did indicate, man, they love the backyard. They mentioned their dog looking out, watching the bunnies. That doesn't cross fair housing, does it? But all of a sudden, my buyer became a what? Person, not a piece of paper. Right? If I have a VA loan, I'm going to talk about their military service. Especially if I see military stuff in the house indicating the seller was also a vet. Make sense? Want to make it human. Then I always end it with this paragraph. I really look forward to partnering with you to get these two clients to work together for a very on time and happy closing. Got it? Does that help? Fire those things, fire it off. Next thing is ring, ring. Hey, Scott, it's Margaret. Just wanted to let you know, I just dropped you in your inbox, my buyer's offer. How's everything going? You doing all right? You need me to bring you a beer? No, I don't say that, but, right, but, you know, how you doing? I just wanted to make sure you thought, hey, my lender's gonna be giving you a call shortly. If he doesn't pick up the phone, I text him. Please don't be the buyer's agent who sends an offer in and doesn't tell anybody you sent it. Who knows? CTM could have gone down and the email never got to Scott. If he didn't know that my offer was coming and he didn't see it in CTM or his email, what if my buyer lost because of that? So always, again, you want that listing agent to believe that you are the best communicating agent in the world because you are. So start the relationship that way. Questions, thoughts? Helpful?
Mhm.
All right, I'm done. I got nothing else. Unless you all do.
Thanks, Margaret. It's good to see you.
You, my friend, need to get on my calendar with some one-on-ones
I know.
now that you're done teaching and taking CE credit so you can teach next year.
Yeah, not done yet, but that's okay.
Yeah, but you'll have time. All right. I will see the two of you. This is where you are. Scott and Mike right here on the corners, right? I will see you all on Tuesday at Ignite. Ian, I think you were both in my Ignite class last Tuesday, right?
No, I've
Value
been doing
propositions.
value propositions. I've been in person.
Right. You were in my in-person Ignite class on Tuesday, right?
Oh,
Right.
yeah, in person, yeah. Yeah, for Ignite.
Oh, yeah. Where's your value prop? Where's your homework that you were supposed to email me?
I wrote it down. I haven't typed it up yet, though.
I was waiting for the dog ate it. All right, get me your homework before Tuesday. All right, guys, have a great weekend. Have some awesome open houses. Okay, I want you to say this all the way to the open house. Today, I will find a ready, willing, and able buyer for this home. Say it all the way, put it in the universe. All right. And then we'll be ready for your phone calls when you need help writing the offers. All right, you guys, have an awesome weekend. I will see you guys next week. Call me if
Yeah.
you need anything.
Hi, thanks,
Bye.
Margaret.
Bye.
Bye.